The Tampa Bay Buccaneers finished the 2022 season with an 8-9 record and won the NFC South despite having a losing record. And because they won the NFC South, that means they hosted a playoff game, and that playoff game would eventually become a 17-point loss to the Dallas Cowboys in the wild card round of the playoffs. It was a pretty disappointing year for the Bucs, especially when you factor in how their 2021 season ended. They narrowly lost to the Rams at home as they nearly completed a comeback despite being down 27-3 towards the end of the third quarter. And the Bucs' 2022 season had promise at one point as they went to Dallas in week 1 and went to New Orleans in week 2 and won by double digits in each game. And when you start the year with 2 road games and ultimately 2 double-digit road victories, the ceiling is as high as the sky. But things got ugly for the Bucs last year, and things are probably going to get ugly this year too. And for clarity, it's not going to be an entire video discussing about how bad the Bucs are. However, I would be very surprised if they make any serious noise this year. But what's important to remember is the Super Bowl with Tom happened, and that was the goal. But now the check is due, and there's no easy way out for the Bucs, and in today's video, we're going to discuss how they will do this year. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing something that cannot get worse from 2022 to 2023, and Tampa, please do not take this as a challenge, but it's the run game. Whenever you think of the Bucs from last year, it's probably something to do with Tom Brady, given it was his final year, and that makes sense. But what you may not know is truly how bad Tampa was at running the football last year. And as we know, a good run game is a quarterback's best friend, no matter who the quarterback is. And Tampa finished dead last in every rushing category last year: rushing attempts, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, and yards per carry. All were 32nd in the league, and obviously that's bad, but to give you an idea of just how bad they were at running the football last year, guys, they had 5 rushing touchdowns as a team. 5 over 17 games, and there were 24 players last year who had more rushing touchdowns than Tampa, including 4 quarterbacks, those of course being Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, Josh Allen, and Daniel Jones. And in some ways for the Bucs last year, it was a miracle that they even got to 8 wins by being this bad at running the football. And at a point, they tried to replace the run game with a short, quick passing game to take its place, as they were averaging just 3.4 yards per carry, and obviously were not going anywhere running the ball, so they were trying anything to get the ball moving. And in week 4 against Kansas City, they had 3 rushing yards as a team, as they on the night had 6 carries for 3 yards, while Kansas City ran for nearly 200 yards and held the ball for nearly 38 minutes of this game. And I do think Tampa will struggle to run the ball this year. Hopefully not as much as last year, because that was historically bad last year. But what I do want to say is I like what GM Jason Light has done over the past few drafts, or at least has attempted to do, and it will of course take a year or two to really show the effects of the last 2 drafts. But specifically, I am referring to drafting lineman Luke Goedeke in the 2nd round of the 2022 draft, and lineman Cody Mauch out of North Dakota State this year. And hell, it applies to Kalijah Cansey in the 1st round of the draft this year too. Tampa is on the brink of a rebuild, and if there's anything that's going to keep a team afloat during a rebuild, or basically not be a 2-15 or 3-14 team, it's good play in the trenches. And that's something every NFL team would love to have, and that's good play on both sides of the line. And to go back to the Luke Goedeke pick for a minute, he did struggle early on as he allowed multiple pressures in every game he played from weeks 1 through 6 last year, but when he came back in week 17, he really finished the year strong, and I hope that continues into 2023 as he protects quarterback Baker Mayfield. It is unfortunate to lose Ryan Jensen before the season starts, but I think there are far worse options the Bucs could have than Robert Hainsey at the center position. And if you know anything about the Bucs offensive line, then you know they have a pretty good player by the name of Tristan Wirfs too, and it is worth noting for Wirfs at least entering this year, he is making the transition to left tackle, and I don't worry about him because of how good of a player he is, but it is definitely something to keep in the back of your mind. And the big thing that I worry about with the Bucs offense this year is, of course, the quarterback position, as Baker Mayfield can run hot and cold, and as we've seen over the past few years, and given he played on 2 teams last year, the cold has come out a lot more as his NFL career has gone along. And I don't think even Bucs fans think Baker is going to be the franchise savior for them, but what I will positively say about Baker is this is probably going to be his last chance as a starting quarterback in the NFL. Sure, he'll have the opportunity to be a backup for a long time, but to truly have the position be his job, this will probably be the last chance, meaning this will be the best football or the most daring we see out of Baker Mayfield, because it is truly now or never for him. And I also worry about the running backs, as they are led by Rachaad White and Chase Edmonds, and it's more of a combination of the offensive line and backs together, as I do think Rachaad has shown a few flashes here and there where if he were in a decent enough situation, he could be a viable starter. And within this, I worry about the offensive line from a run blocking perspective and them getting push on the opposing defensive lines up front. And I hope that improves over the course of the year, but that is something to note for the Bucs running backs this year, given, how they finished 2022 in every rushing category. The top 2 receivers in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are both great players, and I do not worry about them in the slightest, as each went for over 1,000 yards last year, and if Baker can get them the football, and assuming Mike Evans stays a Buck this year, they could do it again. And having said that last comment about Mike Evans, the if he stays a Buck part, what I hope happens and what the Bucs do are, of course, 2 different things, but I want the Bucs to trade Mike, as he is now 30 years old, and to get what they can for him, and to fully embrace the rebuild. Wish him well, and a few years after he retires, bring him back and put him in the Ring of Honor the way he deserves to be for everything he has done for the organization. But I would be surprised if they trade him this close to the season, and ultimately I think Mike stays a Buck for at least the 2023 season. Tight end Cade Otton is a player who had nearly 400 yards receiving in his rookie year, which is very good for a rookie tight end, and if he has the opportunity this year and if he gets the targets, he could very easily inflate that number to 500 or 600 yards along with 5 or 6 touchdowns. Statistically speaking, Baker Mayfield will probably put up decent numbers, and if he plays a full 17 games, I don't doubt a 4,000 yard passing season from him, but the Bucs absolutely cannot repeat just how abysmal they were last year from a rushing perspective. They had 4 games last year with 50 rushing yards or less, and not surprisingly, they were 0-4 in those games. But one part of the Bucs I am a little worried about, at least when they play teams that aren't necessarily in the NFC South, is getting after the quarterback and consistently. Their leader in pressures last year was Joe Tryon-Shoyinka with 46, and their leader in sacks was Vita Vea with 6.5 in 14 games played. And I love Vita as a player, but it's not ideal to have a player like Vita lead the team in sacks, and especially with only 6.5. Not when you invested a first-round pick in Tryon-Shoyinka, and Shaq Barrett gets a little bit of a pass as he only played in 8 games last year, but he only had 3 sacks in those 8 games he played, so it's not like he was having a downright monster year either, and if you were wondering how many pressures Barrett had in those 8 games, it was 22. So, needless to say, I worry when this team plays somebody that loves to pass the ball, and the question is, how will they be able to get after the quarterback, and consistently? And believe it or not, despite my concerns with the Bucs this year, the defense will keep them in a lot of games. They finished 13th in points allowed per game last year, and I do expect them to be in that range this year, or at least pretty close to it. Which brings me to my next point of I love Todd Bowles as a defensive coordinator, but I am not a fan of him as a head coach because there's been multiple times where he makes poor decisions that end up costing the team, or the team simply isn't ready to play and they're not fired up. And I don't think you need to be a rah-rah guy to be a successful head coach in the NFL necessarily, as Bill Belichick, for example, is about as far from a rah-rah guy as you can get, but one of the losses the Bucs had last year in particular was just bad. There's no way around it. They were in Cleveland early in the fourth quarter with a 4th and 2 on the Browns' 37-yard line, with Tom Brady as the quarterback, and they took a delay of game to punt the ball in what would eventually become a touchback. The Bucs would go on to lose in overtime, and they could have went for the kill, and this is one thing I worry about with Tampa this year, is Todd Bowles' in-game decisions. And one other loss in particular was pretty bad too, as they lost 21-3 to Carolina, and on the third play from scrimmage, Mike Evans dropped a wide open touchdown. It happens, it's part of football. Great players make mistakes. But after the game, Mike Evans said something, and I'm paraphrasing here, but after that play, the wind was taken out of our sails and we couldn't really recover. Guys, this was the third play of the game. This wasn't a turnover after being down by 3 scores, and we made a few plays to get some momentum. And aside from Baker Mayfield being the quarterback, or coming off of a year in which the run game was absolutely awful, this is what I worry about with the 2023 Bucs. And the sooner they get a new head coach, and assuming they have a relatively high first-round pick, and with how loaded the 2024 draft class is going to be at the quarterback position, that's when I'll start to truly believe in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers again. And honestly, what I kind of fear for the Bucs this year is them winning too many games to get them out of the range of acquiring a top quarterback in next year's draft and be in essentially no man's land. Because I like their defense a lot, and I think they will hold a lot of teams to under 20 points, and at that point, if all you have to do is put up 21 over the course of 60 minutes, well, you can almost pencil them in for 5 or 6 wins as a floor. Almost, that is. And the thing that stinks for Tampa is guys are getting to their second contracts like Devin White, Antoine Winfield Jr., and Tristan Wirfs probably do not want to go through a rebuild. And I know Bucs fans get frustrated with Devin at times, but I do think they will end up agreeing to a long-term contract and keeping him in Tampa for quite some time. Maybe not at the rate Devin wishes to get paid, but I doubt the Bucs simply let him walk and get a future compensatory pick from him walking. Tampa allowed 20 or more points in 10 games last year, including the playoff game against Dallas, and went 1-9 in those games. And I don't expect the record in games they allowed 20 or more points to be that much different this year. I doubt it's that bad as 1-9, but I don't think it's going to be a significant improvement either. But with how good of a defensive coach Todd Bowles is, Tampa will have more wins than you think. And I know people like to place the Bucs and the Cardinals as Caleb Williams' NFL team, but I don't see any way Tampa loses that many games. Because at the end of the day, they have a considerable amount of talent on this roster, and they have several players teams wish they could get their hands on. I just think from a perspective of how close the Bucs think they are internally from winning another Super Bowl, and where they actually are from winning another Super Bowl, are two entirely different things. Tampa is the last preview for the NFC South, and I like the futures of the Falcons and Panthers specifically, but I don't doubt they split with Tampa this year because of where those teams are in the rebuild. I'd be surprised if Tampa wins the NFC South this year, but they're not going to be as bad of a team as people may think, and because of that, there's no easy way out for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers are admittedly a tough team to preview for the 2023 season, but the team MVP, breakout player, ceiling, and floor are on the screen, and I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe, as only about 23% of people watching are subscribed, and it makes a massive difference. Please check out Underdog Fantasy with the link in the description, as there is a prop for Week 1 for Patrick Mahomes to throw for 1 yard against the Detroit Lions, and it will cash. There is, of course, season props for the Bucs, like Chris Godwin going for over 800 yards for the entire season, which I do think would hit. But if you would be so inclined to check out the link in the description, it helps the channel immensely. And until the next team preview, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.